The stars had always seemed peaceful to the people of Earth. For 30 years, humanity had looked up at the night sky and felt wonder. They had joined the galactic community as a small and quiet member. They traded with alien species. They learned new sciences. They smiled and nodded when bigger empires looked down on them. But on this cold morning, in the year 2347, the peace ended. President Yuna stood at the window of her office in Seoul. The United Earth Federation headquarters was a tall building made of glass and steel. From here, she could see the city stretching out below her. People walked on the streets. Children went to school. Life moved forward, like any normal day. Then her assistant ran into the room. His face was white with fear. "Madam President," he said. His voice was shaking. "They are here." Yuna did not ask who. She already knew. The reports had been coming for weeks. The Velen Dominion was moving toward Earth. Everyone had hoped it was just a patrol. Everyone had prayed the great empire would pass them by. They were wrong. Yuna walked to her desk and pressed a button. A holographic screen appeared in the air before her. What she saw made her heart grow cold. 500 warships filled Earth's orbit. They were massive vessels, each one the size of a small city. Their hulls were silver and smooth, shaped like long daggers pointing at the planet below. The Velen Dominion had arrived in force. At the center of the fleet was the largest ship of all. This was the flagship of Admiral Korin, commander of the Velen Third Armada. He was known across the galaxy as a conqueror. He had crushed 12 civilizations in his career. He had never lost a single battle. Now his cold eyes were fixed on Earth. The broadcast began without warning. Every screen on the planet lit up at once. Every phone, every tablet, every public display showed the same image. Admiral Korin sat on a throne of black metal. His skin was pale blue, and his eyes were like golden coins. He wore armor covered in metals and symbols of his many victories. "People of Earth," he said. His voice was calm and cruel. "I am Admiral Korin of the Velen Dominion. Your world now belongs to us. You have 48 hours to surrender completely. Give us your government, give us your resources, give us your obedience. If you refuse, we will burn your cities one by one until nothing remains." He leaned forward slightly. A small smile appeared on his thin lips. "Do not test us. We have destroyed species far greater than yours. You are insects before us. Surrender, and you may live as servants. Resist, and you will die as examples." The broadcast ended. Silence fell across the planet. In the Federation headquarters, chaos erupted. World leaders appeared on emergency calls. Generals shouted for calm. Scientists tried to calculate their options. Everyone was afraid. Everyone was angry. Everyone felt helpless. Earth's defense fleet was small. They had only 60 frigates, old ships that were outdated by galactic standards. The Velen Armada could destroy them in minutes. There was no hope in a direct fight. "We must negotiate," said one leader from Europe. "Perhaps we can offer them something. Resources. Territory. Anything." "They do not want to negotiate," said a general from Africa. "They want slaves. They want everything." "Then we fight," said another voice. "We fight and we die with honor." President Yuna listened to all of them. She let them argue and shout. She watched the fear spread across their faces. And through it all, she remained calm. Finally, she raised her hand. The room fell silent. "Leave me," she said. "All of you. I need to think." One by one, the leaders and generals left the room. Soon, Yuna was alone. She walked back to her window and looked up at the sky. She could not see the Velen ships from here, but she knew they were there, waiting, watching. She took a deep breath and made a decision. Yuna walked to her desk and opened a hidden drawer. Inside was a small communication device. It was old and simple, not connected to any official network. She had received it 10 years ago, on the day she became president. The previous president had given it to her with only one instruction. When the day comes, he had said, use this. Yuna pressed the button. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered to life. A face appeared. It was an old man with gray hair and tired eyes. But those eyes were sharp and strong. This was General Taeho, the commander of a force that officially did not exist. Madam President, he said, I was expecting your call. They have come, Yuna said simply. 500 ships. We have 48 hours. Taeho nodded slowly. His expression did not change. He showed no fear, no surprise, no worry. He looked like a man who had been waiting for this moment. His entire life. I know, he said. We have been watching them for days. Can we stop them? Yuna asked. Taeho was quiet for a moment. Then something changed in his eyes. It was not hope. It was certainty. Madam President, he said, we have been preparing for 30 years. Every treaty we signed, every insult we accepted, every time we pretended to be weak, it was all for this day. He leaned closer to the camera. The Black Fleet is ready. 312 ships. Technology the Dominion has never seen. Weapons they cannot imagine. Soldiers who have trained their whole lives for this fight. Yuna felt something stir in her chest. For the first time since the broadcast, she felt hope. Why did we hide? She asked. Why did we pretend to be weak for so long? Taeho smiled. It was a cold smile, but there was warmth behind it. Because the galaxy underestimates weak species, they ignore them. They never look too closely. For 30 years, the Dominion thought we were insects. They never sent spies to watch us carefully. They never wondered what we were building in the shadows. He paused. That was their mistake. Yuna nodded. She understood now. Humanity had never been weak. They had been waiting, watching, building their strength in secret, while the galaxy laughed at them. What do you need from me? She asked. Keep the world calm, Taeho said. Put on a show of panic and despair. Let the Velen think we are breaking. Let them believe their victory is certain, when they are most confident. When they think this will be easy, we will show them the truth. And what is the truth, General? Taeho's smile grew wider. The truth is that humanity does not surrender. We never have. We never will. And tonight, the Velen Dominion will learn what happens when they threaten our home. The call ended. Yuna stood alone in her office. Outside, the world was falling into chaos. People were crying. Soldiers were preparing for a hopeless battle. The news showed panic and fear, but Yuna felt calm. She knew something the rest of the world did not. Help was coming. The Black Fleet was waking up. And soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn to fear humanity. She looked up at the sky one more time. 48 hours, she whispered. You gave us 48 hours. You should have run while you had the chance. Deep beneath the frozen surface of Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, there was a city that no one knew about. It was called Base Shadow. Officially, it did not exist. No maps showed it. No records mentioned it. To the rest of the galaxy, Europa was just a ball of ice, floating in space. But beneath that ice, thousands of people worked day and night. They had been working for 30 years. General Taeho walked through the long metal corridors of the base. Soldiers saluted as he passed. Engineers looked up from their screens and nodded with respect. Everyone knew who he was. Everyone knew what he had built. Taeho reached a large door marked with a simple label, Command Center. He pressed his hand against the scanner, and the door slid open. Inside was a room filled with screens and holographic displays. Officers sat at stations, monitoring communications from across the solar system. At the center of the room was a large table showing a three-dimensional map of Earth's orbit. 500 red dots represented the Velan fleet. 60 small blue dots showed Earth's official defense ships, but there were other dots on the map, hidden in the asteroid belt, scattered across the moons of Saturn and Jupiter, waiting in the darkness of deep space. 312 black dots. The Black Fleet. Commander Minho stood at the main console. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a serious face. He had served under Tejo for 20 years. He was one of the few people who knew the full truth about humanity's secret. "General," Minho said, "all ships report ready. Crews are at battle stations. We can launch within 4 hours." Tejo nodded. "Good. What about the Velan? Any movement?" "They are holding position." Admiral Corin seems confident. He has not even raised his shields. He thinks this will be easy. A small smile appeared on Tejo's face. Let him think that. Confidence makes people careless. Tejo walked to a side door and entered a smaller room. Here, away from the noise of the command center, he found the person he was looking for. Dr. Hana sat at a desk, covered with papers and data screens. She was a small woman, with gray hair tied back in a simple bun. Her glasses reflected the blue light of her computer. She looked tired, but her eyes were bright and sharp. Hana was the most brilliant scientist humanity had ever produced. 30 years ago, she had made the discovery that changed everything. "Dr. Hana," Tejo said, "how are the final checks?" Hana looked up and smiled. "Everything is perfect, General. The ships are ready. The weapons are charged. All systems are working at full power." She stood up and walked to a window. Outside, they could see the massive underground dock where ships were being prepared. Black vessels floated in rows, their hulls dark as night. They did not reflect light. They seemed to swallow it. 30 years, Hana said softly. "It took us 30 years to build all this. To reverse engineer the technology. To train the crews. To create weapons that the galaxy has forgotten." "Tell me again," Tejo said, "about what you found on Mars." Hana nodded. She had told this story many times, but it never got old. "In 2317, our first deep survey team found ruins beneath the surface of Mars. Ancient structures buried for over 10,000 years. We thought they were just rocks at first. Then we found the vault." She paused, remembering. Inside the vault were ships, weapons, data crystals filled with knowledge, and a message. "The warning," Tejo said. "Yes." The message was from a species called the Builders. They had been powerful once. They had controlled 100 star systems. But the ancestors of the Velan Dominion had attacked them. The war lasted centuries. In the end, the Builders lost. But before they fell, Tejo continued, they hid their greatest weapons. They left them for whoever came next. "They left them for us," Hana said. "The Builders knew that someday, another species would face the same enemy. They wanted to give that species a chance to win." She turned to face Tejo. "Their technology is incredible. Shield systems that absorb energy instead of blocking it. Weapons that ignore conventional defenses. Engines that can fold space itself. The Velan have never faced anything like this. They have forgotten that this technology exists. And now we will remind them," Tejo said. Far away from Europa, on Earth, something else was happening. Captain Sujin sat in her small apartment in Busan. She had retired from the military 5 years ago. At least, that was what her records said. In truth, she had never really left. She had simply moved to a different kind of service. Her phone buzzed. A message appeared on the screen. Just 3 words. "Silent thunder active." Sujin felt her heart beat faster. She had waited 5 years for this message. She had trained for 20 years before that. Her whole life had been building toward this moment. She went to her closet and opened a hidden panel. Behind it was a uniform. Black fabric. No markings. No symbols. Just pure darkness. The uniform of the Black Fleet. She put it on and looked at herself in the mirror. She was not young anymore. There were lines on her face and gray in her hair. But her eyes were sharp, and her hands were steady. "It is time," she said to herself. Across the planet, the same scene played out in thousands of homes. Veterans received the same message. Pilots, engineers, gunners, and officers opened their hidden closets. They put on their black uniforms. They said goodbye to their families, without explaining where they were going. They moved in silence, traveling through secret routes to hidden bases. Shuttles took them up through the atmosphere, past the watching eyes of the Velen fleet. The Dominion did not notice. They were too busy preparing for an easy victory. In the asteroid belt, between Mars and Jupiter, the largest of all the secret bases waited. It was called Shipyard Omega. Here, the Black Fleet had been constructed piece by piece over 3 decades. Lieutenant Hodgin walked through the corridors of the shipyard, checking the final preparations. He was young, only 25 years old. He had been born into this secret. His parents had both served the project before him. Hodgin stopped at a window and looked out at the fleet. 312 ships floated in perfect formation. At their center was the largest vessel, the flagship. Its name was painted in white letters on its black hull, Eternal Defiance. This was General Tejo's ship. This was where the war would be commanded. Hodgin felt proud to serve on it. A voice came over the speakers. "All crew members, report to your stations. Final launch preparations begin in 2 hours. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Hodgin took a deep breath. His whole life had led to this. Everything he had learned, every simulation he had run, every hour of training. It was all for today. He walked toward the Eternal Defiance. Other soldiers walked beside him. They did not talk. They did not need to. They all knew what was coming. Back on Europa, General Tejo received the final reports. All ships ready. All crews in position. All weapons charged. He opened a communication channel to President Yuna on Earth. "Madam President," he said, "we are ready." Yuna appeared on his screen. She looked tired, but determined. "How long until you can reach Earth orbit?" she asked. "We will fold space and arrive in seconds. The Valen will not see us coming. One moment the sky will be empty. The next moment, we will be there. And then," Tejo's expression hardened, "and then we give them a choice. Leave or die. Do you think they will leave?" "No," Tejo said honestly. "They are too proud. They have never lost. They cannot imagine losing. They will fight. And we will win?" Tejo thought about all the years of preparation. The technology they had recovered. The soldiers they had trained. The weapons they had built. "Yes," he said. "We will win. And the galaxy will never look at humanity the same way again." The countdown began. In 2 hours, the Black Fleet would launch. In 2 hours, humanity would reveal its greatest secret. The Velen Dominion was about to learn a terrible lesson. Some species only look weak. Some species hide their strength. And when those species finally show their true power, empires fall. The Black Fleet was ready. And Earth's hour of glory was coming. Admiral Corrin sat on his throne and watched Earth spin slowly below his fleet. It was a beautiful planet. Blue oceans, green lands, white clouds. It reminded him of pictures he had seen of the old Velan homeworld, before his ancestors had used up all its resources. Soon, Earth would belong to the Dominion. Its resources would feed the Empire. Its people would serve as workers and soldiers. Another world added to the collection. Another species brought to heal. Corrin smiled. This was almost too easy. 40 hours had passed since his ultimatum. The humans had sent messages begging for more time. They had offered gifts and promises. Their leaders had appeared on screens with tears in their eyes, asking for mercy. Pathetic, Corrin thought. Absolutely pathetic. His second in command, a younger officer named Vex, approached the throne. Admiral, the deadline approaches. Only 8 hours remain. The humans have not formally surrendered. Of course they have not, Corin said. They are still hoping for a miracle. They always hope until the very end. That is what weak species do. He stood up and walked to the main viewing window. The stars stretched out before him, cold and endless. Prepare the bombardment cannons, he ordered. When the deadline passes, we will destroy 3 of their largest cities. That will break their spirit. Then they will crawl to us on their knees. Yes, Admiral. Corin returned to his throne, satisfied. He had done this many times before. The pattern was always the same. Threaten, destroy, conquer. It was simple. It was effective. It never failed. He closed his eyes and allowed himself a moment of rest. That moment was interrupted by an alarm. The sound was loud and sharp. Officers across the bridge jumped to their feet. Screens flashed with warning lights. Something was happening. What is it? Corin demanded. Report. Vex stared at his console, his face growing pale. Admiral, we are detecting emergent signatures. Ships are folding into our space. Emergent signatures? From where? Who would dare? Sir, the signatures are. They are behind us. Corin stood up quickly. Show me. The main screen changed. It showed the space behind the Velen Armada, the dark void that should have been empty. It was no longer empty. The darkness itself seemed to tear open. Great rips appeared in the fabric of space, glowing with strange energy. And through those rips came ships, black ships. They emerged one after another, sliding out of fold space like shadows coming to life. Their hulls were darker than the void around them. They did not reflect starlight. They seemed to drink it in. Corin counted them as they appeared. 10, 20, 50, 100, 200, 300. 312 ships formed a perfect wall behind the Velan fleet. At their center was the largest vessel, a massive warship that made even Corin's flagship look small. Impossible, he whispered. The humans only have 60 ships. Old, broken ships. This cannot be real, but it was real. The Black Fleet had arrived. On the bridge of the Eternal Defiance, General Tejo watched the Velen fleet through his own viewing screen. He saw their ships turning in confusion. He saw their formation breaking as captains tried to understand what was happening. They were afraid. He could feel it across the void. For the first time in their lives, the Velan were afraid. Open a channel, Tejo ordered. All frequencies. I want every ship in their fleet to hear this. Commander Minho nodded. Channel open, sir. Tejo stood straight and spoke clearly. Admiral Corin of the Velen Dominion. This is General Tejo of the Black Fleet. You came to our world with threats and demands. You gave us 48 hours to surrender. He paused, letting the words sink in. We are giving you 48 seconds to retreat. Leave our system now. Run back to your masters. Tell them that Earth is not for the taking. If you stay, you will die. All of you. The countdown begins now. On the Velen flagship, Corin stared at the screen. His hands gripped the arms of his throne so hard that his knuckles turned white. 48 seconds. The human dared to give him 48 seconds. Around him, his officers waited for orders. Some looked scared. Others looked angry. None of them knew what to do. Sir, Vex said carefully. Perhaps we should consider... Consider what? Corin shouted. Consider running? Consider admitting defeat to a bunch of insects? No. These humans are bluffing. Those ships are probably empty shells, built to frighten us. They cannot have real warships. It is impossible. But sir, those designs, I have seen them in the archives. They look like silence. Corin rose from his throne. I have conquered 12 worlds. I have destroyed civilizations. I will not be scared away by tricks and shadows. He pointed at the Black Fleet, All ships, attack formation. Full power to weapons. Destroy those vessels. Show these humans what the Velen Dominion can do. The 48 seconds ended. Corrin had made his choice. On the Eternal Defiance, Tejo watched the Velen fleet begin its attack run. 500 ships turned their weapons toward the Black Fleet. He saw the glow of plasma cannons charging. He saw missile bays opening. They did not run, Minho observed. No, Tejo agreed. I did not think they would. Pride is a powerful thing. It makes people foolish. Orders, sir. Tejo looked at his crew. These men and women had trained for years. They had given up normal lives. They had kept secrets from everyone they loved. All for this moment. Raise absorption shields, he commanded. Let them fire first. Let them see how useless their weapons are. Then we will respond. The Velan opened fire. The space between the two fleets lit up with destruction. Plasma bolts, antimatter torpedoes, laser beams, and missiles flew toward the Black Fleet. It was a storm of firepower, enough to destroy a moon. The weapons struck the black ships, and nothing happened. Lieutenant Hodgin watched his console with wonder. The shield readings did not even move. The Velan weapons hit the Eternal Defiance and simply disappeared. The energy was absorbed, swallowed, gone. Shield integrity at 100%, he reported. Sir, they cannot hurt us. On the Velen flagship, Corrin could not believe what he was seeing. His entire fleet was firing everything they had. Thousands of weapons. Millions of tons of explosive power. And the black ships just sat there, taking it all, without a scratch. This is impossible, he said again. No shields can do that. No technology is that advanced. But his scanners did not lie. The enemy ships were untouched. Their hulls showed no damage. Their systems showed no stress. The Black Fleet had not even moved. Then General Tejo gave his next order. All ships, return fire. Show them what we can do. Captain Sujin sat in her fighter craft, waiting in the launch bay of the carrier ship Righteous Fury. Around her, 200 other pilots sat in their own ships. They were silent, focused, ready. The order came through her headset. All fighter squadrons, launch, target their command ships, show no mercy. Sujin smiled and pushed her engines to full power. Her fighter shot out of the bay into open space. She saw everything at once. The massive Velan fleet, confused and firing blindly. The Black Fleet, solid and unmoving. And now, thousands of human fighters pouring out like angry bees from a hive. The Black Fleet opened fire. Gravity lances cut through the void. Where they touched Velen ships, the metal twisted and collapsed. Ships folded in on themselves, crushed into balls of scrap. Phase cannons ignored shields entirely. Their beams passed through protective barriers like they were not there. They struck hulls and reactors, creating explosions that lit up the darkness. Swarm missiles launched in clouds. Each missile split into 100 smaller missiles. Each smaller missile split again. They filled space with death, seeking targets, finding them, destroying them. Sujin flew through the chaos, her hands steady on the controls. A Velen cruiser loomed before her. Squadron 7, she called. Follow me. Her squadron formed behind her. 20 fighters moved as one. They dove toward the cruiser, firing their weapons. The cruiser tried to defend itself, but its guns were too slow. Human pilots were too fast. The cruiser exploded. Sujin flew through the debris without slowing down. Find the next target, she ordered. Keep moving. Do not give them time to think. Across the battlefield, the Velen fleet was dying. Ships exploded everywhere. Escape pods launched in all directions. Officers screamed orders that no one followed. Admiral Corrin watched his fleet crumble. 300 of his ships were already gone. The rest were breaking formation, trying to run. He could not understand it. He could not accept it. This cannot be happening. he said. His voice was hollow. We are the Velen Dominion. We do not lose. But they were losing. They were dying. And there was nothing he could do to stop it. General Tejo watched calmly from his bridge. The battle was going exactly as planned. Human technology was generations ahead of the Velen. Human tactics were superior. Human soldiers fought with skill and courage. Commander Minho, he said. Status report. Enemy fleet down to 150 ships, sir. Our losses? 0. 0 losses. Not a single Black Fleet ship destroyed. The Velen had thrown everything they had, and they had accomplished nothing. Focus fire on their flagship, Tejo ordered. Disable it, but do not destroy it. I want to have a conversation with Admiral Corrin. Yes, sir. The Eternal Defiance turned its weapons toward the Velen flagship. In moments, the great silver ship was crippled. Its engines died. Its weapons fell silent. It drifted helplessly in space. The battle of soul was ending. And humanity had won. Tejo allowed himself a small moment of satisfaction. 30 years of planning. 30 years of hiding. 30 years of patience. It had all been worth it. Now came the next part. Now came the message that would change the galaxy forever. The battlefield was quiet now. Where 500 Velen warships had filled the sky, only scattered debris remained. Broken hulls drifted slowly through space. Small fires burned where oxygen leaked from shattered vessels. Escape pods floated like seeds blown from a dying flower. The Black Fleet stood untouched. Not a single scratch marked their dark hulls. Not a single ship had been lost. 312 vessels waited in perfect formation, their weapons still hot from use. Admiral Corrin's flagship drifted at the center of the destruction. Its engines were dead. Its shields were gone. Its weapons had been melted into useless lumps of metal. Only life support still worked, keeping the crew alive inside their broken ship. Corrin sat in his throne room, surrounded by his surviving officers. The lights were dim. The screens showed only static. The great admiral who had conquered 12 worlds now sat in darkness, waiting to learn his fate. The door hissed open. Human soldiers walked in. They wore black armor and carried weapons Corrin did not recognize. They moved with perfect discipline, spreading out to cover every corner of the room. Velen officers reached for their sidearms, but one look at the humans made them stop. There was no point in fighting now. Behind the soldiers came General Tejo. He was older than Corrin had imagined. His hair was gray, and his face was lined with years. But his eyes were sharp and cold. He walked with the confidence of a man who had already won. Tejo stopped in front of Corrin's throne. For a long moment, the two commanders just looked at each other. Human and Velen. Victor and loser. Admiral Corrin, Tejo said. Welcome aboard what is left of your flagship. Corrin wanted to stand tall. He wanted to show defiance. But his legs would not work. He stayed in his throne, gripping the arms with weak fingers. How? He whispered. How did you do this? You were nothing. A small, weak species. No one considered you a threat. That was the point, Tejo replied. We wanted you to underestimate us. We wanted the whole galaxy to forget about us. While you were busy conquering and building your empire, we were preparing in secret. But those ships, that technology, it is ancient. It is from before the Dominion even existed. Tejo nodded. 10,000 years ago, a species called the Builders fought your ancestors. They lost that war. But before they fell, they hid their greatest weapons. They left a message, promising that one day another species would find what they had hidden. He gestured toward the window, where the black ships floated in the starlight. We found it. We learned it. We built upon it. For 30 years, we made ourselves ready. And now, here we are. Corrin shook his head slowly. You could have used this power earlier. You could have demanded respect. Why did you hide? Korin, why did you hide? Because if we had shown our strength, you would have come sooner. You would have come with 1,000 ships, instead of 500. You would have been careful. But because you thought we were weak, you came with confidence. You came without caution. You walked into our trap. The Admiral looked at the human general with new eyes. He had thought humans were simple creatures. He had thought they were honest and predictable. Now, he understood that they were none of those things. What happens now? Korin asked. Will you kill me? Will you execute my crew? No, Tejo said. We are not like you. We do not destroy species for sport. We do not conquer innocent worlds. We only wanted to be left alone. He stepped closer to Korin. You will return to your empire. You will take your surviving crews and your remaining ships. You will go home and tell your leaders what happened here. Tell them that Earth is protected. Tell them that humanity is not to be touched. Tell them that if any Velen vessel enters our space again, we will not be so merciful. Korin stared at him. You are letting us go? Yes, but there is a condition. What condition? Tejo smiled slightly. It was not a kind smile. We have recorded this entire battle. Every moment, every death, every failure of your fleet. We are going to broadcast this recording to the entire galaxy. Every species under Dominion rule will see what happened today. They will see that the great Velen Armada was destroyed by a species you called insects. Korin's face went pale. You cannot do that. The Empire will. The Empire will do nothing. What can they do? Send another fleet? We will destroy that one too. Send a larger fleet? We will destroy that one as well. You have no weapon that can hurt us. You have no defense that can stop us. He leaned in close. The Dominion's power was built on fear. Everyone feared you because everyone believed you could not be beaten. Now, everyone will know the truth. You can be beaten. You can be broken. You can be made to run away. Korin understood now. This was not just about saving Earth. This was about breaking the Dominion's hold on the galaxy. If other species saw what happened here, they would start to hope. They would start to question. They would start to resist. You want to start a revolution, he said. No, Tejo replied. I want to finish one. Your empire has oppressed the galaxy for too long. Today is the beginning of the end. He turned and walked toward the door. His soldiers followed. You have 12 hours to collect your survivors and leave this system, Tejo said over his shoulder. After that, any Velan vessel we find will be destroyed without warning. Do you understand? Korin nodded slowly. He had no choice but to understand. The humans left. The door closed behind them. Korin sat alone in the darkness of his ruined flagship. Hours later, the surviving Velan ships gathered near their crippled flagship. Only 83 vessels remained from the original 500. Many of them were damaged. All of them were full of scared and confused crew members. Korin broadcast a final order. All ships, retreat to Dominion space. Full speed, we are done here. The Velen fleet began its long journey home. As they flew away from Earth, they passed the Black Fleet one last time. The dark ships did not fire. They did not chase. They just watched, silent and terrible. Captain Sujin flew her fighter past the retreating Velen vessels. She felt no joy at their defeat. She felt no hatred for them. She only felt relief that it was over. Her radio crackled. Squadron 7. Return to the righteous fury. Good work out there. Understood, she replied. Coming home, she turned her fighter toward the carrier ship. Around her, other pilots were doing the same. The battle was over. They had won. On the Eternal Defiance, General Tejo watched the Velen fleet disappear into the distance. Commander Minho stood beside him. Sir, Minho said, the broadcast is ready. We can send the recording to the entire galaxy whenever you give the order. Send it now, Tejo said. Let everyone see what happened here. Minho nodded and gave the command. Across 1,000 star systems, screens lit up with footage of the Battle of Sol. Species that had lived under Dominion rule for centuries watched in amazement as the Great Silver Fleet was torn apart. They saw the Black Fleet emerge from nowhere. They saw human weapons cut through Valan ships like knives through paper. They saw Admiral Corrin's flagship reduced to a floating wreck, and they began to hope. On a mining world at the edge of Dominion space, workers put down their tools and stared at the screens. For the first time in generations, someone had stood up to the Valan. For the first time, someone had won. On a prison planet where political dissidents were held, inmates gathered around hidden screens and watched in silence. When the recording ended, they looked at each other with new fire in their eyes. On the Dominion homeworld, the High Council watched the footage with growing horror. Their greatest fleet had been destroyed by a species they had dismissed as worthless. Their reputation of invincibility was shattered. The galaxy was changing. Everyone could feel it. President Yuna stood on the steps of the Federation headquarters, looking up at the sky. The threat was over. Earth was safe. Her people would survive. Behind her, crowds of people gathered. They had watched the battle on their screens. They had seen their secret fleet appear from nowhere and crush the invaders. They had learned that their government had been protecting them all along. They cheered. They cried. They held each other and shouted with joy. Yuna turned to face them. Television cameras broadcast her image across the planet. "People of Earth," she said. "Today we defended our home. Today we showed the galaxy that humanity will not be conquered. We did not start this fight, but we finished it. We did not want war, but when war came, we were ready." She paused, gathering herself. "But our work is not done. Other species are still suffering under Dominion rule. They have seen what we did today. They are starting to hope. We must give them more than hope. We must give them help." The crowd listened in silence. The Black Fleet will not be hidden anymore. From this day forward, it will defend any world that asks for protection. It will fight for any species that wants to be free. The Valan Dominion's rule is ending. A new era is beginning. The crowd erupted in cheers again. They had been scared that morning. Now, they were proud. General Tejo watched the speech on a screen in his ready room. He felt tired. 30 years of work had led to this day. He had done what he promised to do. But there was still more to come. The Dominion would not accept defeat easily. They would try to strike back. They would look for new weapons, new strategies, new ways to hurt Earth. The war was not over. It was just beginning. Still, Tejo allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Earth was safe. His people had proven themselves. The galaxy knew what humanity could do. He looked out the window at the stars. "One battle at a time," he said to himself. "One battle at a time." 6 months had passed since the Battle of Sol. The galaxy was not the same anymore. News of humanity's victory had spread to every corner of the Dominion. Species that had been conquered and oppressed for thousands of years suddenly found new courage. They whispered to each other in the darkness. They gathered in secret meetings. They planned. The first rebellion started on a world called Theta Prime. The people there had been forced to work in mines for generations. They had never fought back because they believed the Valan could not be beaten. But after seeing the Battle of Sol, they believed something different. They rose up. They took over their mines. They captured the Valan soldiers, who guarded them. And when the Dominion sent ships to punish them, something unexpected happened. The Black Fleet arrived. Captain Sujin commanded the rescue mission. She led 12 warships through fold space and emerged in orbit above Theta Prime. The Valan punishment force had 20 ships. It did not matter. Within 2 hours, all 20 were destroyed or disabled. The people of Theta Prime watched from their planet's surface as the black ships tore apart their oppressors. When it was over, Sujin broadcast a message to the whole world. You are free now. The Valan cannot hurt you anymore. Earth stands with you. More rebellions followed. On world after world, oppressed species found their courage. Some fought with weapons. Some fought with strikes and protests. Some simply refused to obey anymore. The Dominion tried to respond. They sent fleets to crush the uprisings. But they never knew when the Black Fleet would appear. Sometimes it came. Sometimes it did not. The uncertainty made the Velen commanders hesitate. Hesitation made them slow. Slowness gave the rebels time to organize. Dr. Hana did not rest after the battle. She opened her archives and began sharing technology with species that wanted to fight for their freedom. She taught engineers how to build better weapons. She taught scientists how to create stronger shields. Knowledge should not be hoarded, she said. It should be given to those who need it. Commander Minho traveled from world to world, training rebel forces in human military tactics. He taught them guerrilla warfare. He taught them how to hit hard and disappear. He taught them how to survive against a larger enemy. The Valan expect you to fight like they do, he told his students. Do not give them what they expect. Be surprising. Be unpredictable. Be everywhere and nowhere at once. The Dominion's power was crumbling. Not quickly, but steadily. Cracks appeared in their empire. Trade routes became dangerous. Loyal worlds started to question their loyalty. The High Council argued about what to do, but they could not agree on anything. Admiral Corrin returned home in disgrace. He had expected to be punished for his failure, maybe even executed. Instead, he was simply ignored. The council was too busy dealing with the rebellions to worry about one failed admiral. Corrin spent his days watching the news. He saw his empire falling apart piece by piece. He saw the species he had once conquered, now rising up and fighting back. Part of him wanted to hate the humans. They had destroyed his fleet. They had ruined his career. They had broken everything he believed in. But another part of him understood. The humans had done what any species would do if they could. They had defended their home. They had protected their people. They had refused to become slaves. He respected that, even if he did not want to admit it. On Earth, life slowly returned to normal. The fear of those terrible 48 hours faded into memory. People went back to their jobs and their families. Children went back to school. But something had changed. Humanity walked taller now. They knew what they had accomplished. They knew what they were capable of. General Tejo retired 6 months after the battle. He had done what he set out to do. He had built the Black Fleet. He had protected Earth. He had lit a fire that was spreading across the galaxy. Now it was time for others to carry on. He returned to Korea and bought a small house in the countryside. It was quiet there. Peaceful. He could hear birds singing and wind moving through the trees. Lieutenant Hajin visited him on the day of his retirement. The young man had been promoted many times since the battle. He was a captain now, commanding his own ship. General, Hajin said, are you sure you want to leave? The war is not over. There is still so much to do. General, the war is not over. General Hajin said. Tejo smiled and poured tea for his guest. There will always be more to do. That is the nature of things. But I am old and tired. This fight belongs to the next generation now. What if we need you? What if something goes wrong? Tejo looked at the young captain with knowing eyes. Then I will come back. But I do not think you will need me. You are ready. All of you are ready. I spent 30 years preparing humanity for this moment. I know my work was good. Hajin nodded slowly. He understood. Thank you, General, for everything. Do not thank me. Thank the people who came before me. Thank the workers who built the ships. Thank the soldiers who trained in secret. Thank the families who never knew where their loved ones were going. He took a sip of his tea. I was just one part of a very large machine. We all were. Captain Sujin took command of the Eternal Defiance. The flagship that had won the Battle of Seoul now led the Galactic Liberation Fleet. It was a new name, for a new mission. They were not just defending Earth anymore. They were helping the entire galaxy find its freedom. She stood on the bridge, looking at the stars through the viewing window. So many stars. So many worlds. So many species waiting to be free. "Captain," her communications officer said, "we have received a request for assistance. A world called New Haven. They are under attack by Dominion forces." "How many enemy ships?" 35, Captain." Sujin smiled. "Set course for New Haven. Full speed. Let us give them a surprise." The Eternal Defiance turned and jumped into fold space. Behind it, a dozen other Black Fleet ships followed. They moved as one, silent and deadly. Across the galaxy, other human ships were doing the same thing. Wherever people fought for freedom, the Black Fleet appeared. They could not be everywhere at once, but they tried. They helped when they could. They inspired when they could not. 1 year after the Battle of Seoul, President Yuna addressed the galaxy. 1 year ago, the Velan Dominion demanded our surrender. They expected us to kneel. They expected us to give up everything we had built and become their servants. She paused, looking into the camera with steady eyes. Instead, we stood up. We fought back, and we won. But our victory was not just for Earth. It was for every species that has ever suffered under the Dominion's rule. It was for every world that has ever been conquered and oppressed. It was for everyone who ever dreamed of being free. She took a breath. Today, I am proud to announce the formation of the Free Worlds Alliance. 27 species have joined together to stand against tyranny. We will protect each other. We will help each other. We will build a galaxy where no one has to be afraid anymore. On worlds across the galaxy, people watched her speech. Some cried, some cheered, some simply nodded in silence. The Velan Dominion still existed. They still had ships and soldiers and weapons. They were not defeated yet, but they were no longer in control. Their power was fading. Their empire was shrinking. And the light that humanity had lit on that first day was spreading, growing brighter with each passing moment. In his little house in Korea, General Taeho watched the speech on a small screen. He saw the 27 flags of the Free Worlds Alliance displayed behind President Yuna. He saw the hope in her eyes. He smiled and turned off the screen. Outside, the sun was setting. The sky turned orange and pink and purple. It was beautiful. Taeho walked onto his porch and sat in an old wooden chair. He looked up at the sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. Somewhere up there, Captain Sujin was leading the fleet into battle. Commander Minho was training new soldiers. Dr. Hana was sharing knowledge with alien scientists. Lieutenant Hajin was commanding his own ship. They would carry on. They would fight and struggle and sacrifice. They would build something new and beautiful from the ashes of the old order. And Taeho could rest at last. He had done his part. The wind moved through the trees. The stars grew brighter. An old general closed his eyes and felt peace. Far away, among those very stars, the Eternal Defiance emerged from fold space above New Haven. Captain Sujin looked at the Velan fleet, arrayed against her. "All ships," she ordered. "Battle stations." The Black Fleet moved forward. Another fight was beginning. But that was all right. Humanity had learned something important in the last 30 years. They had learned that the smallest candle can push back the deepest darkness. They had learned that hope is stronger than fear. They had learned that free people, fighting for what matters, can never truly be defeated. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was leading the way. This was only the beginning. The teleportation light faded, and Professor Talvik found himself standing in the simulation zone, where Do-hyun had built his shelter. The artificial sun was gone now, replaced by a neutral gray sky. The environmental controls had been turned off, leaving the temperature comfortable and the air still. But the shelter remained. Professor Talvik approached it slowly. Do-hyun walked beside him, silent and patient. Other figures began to appear as well, students who had requested permission to witness the inspection, officials from the Academy administration, and even a few professors from other departments who had heard about the unprecedented result. Brixa was there. So was Corin. They stood at a respectful distance, watching with undisguised curiosity. Subin had somehow convinced an official to let her accompany the group. She stood at the back, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The shelter did not look impressive. That was the first thing everyone noticed. It was a hole in the ground, covered with what appeared to be dead grass. The rocky outcrop beside it looked ordinary. There were no elegant curves, no geometric precision, no evidence of advanced technology. Professor Talvik stopped at the entrance and crouched down. His forearms touched the edges of the pit, feeling the packed earth walls. "You dug this by hand?" he asked. "With that metal piece, mostly," Do-hyun replied, pointing to the flat scrap he had used as a shovel. "But the technique is the same as using hands." Talvik pressed against the wall. It was solid. It did not crumble or shift. He examined the mixture of sand and vegetation that Do-hyun had used as mortar. "This binding agent," he said. "What is it?" "Sand, crushed vegetation, and a small amount of water. It hardens as it dries. On Earth, we call similar techniques adobe or cob. Humans have used them for thousands of years." Professor Talvik moved to the roof. He touched the layers of dried vegetation, feeling their thickness. He measured the angle of the metal rod framework with his eyes. It was not perfect, not mathematically precise, but it was stable and functional. "You created insulation," he observed, "without any specialized materials. The vegetation traps air," Do-hyun explained. "Air is a poor conductor of heat. The more air pockets you create, the better the insulation. This principle works everywhere in the universe. It does not require special technology." Talvik was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised everyone watching. He climbed into the shelter. His tall, thin body barely fit, but he managed to squeeze inside. He sat in the depression that Do-hyun had dug, his back against the cool stone wall, his forearms folded in his lap. From inside, the world looked different. The harsh environment was blocked out. The stone provided shade and protection. The vegetation roof filtered the light. It was quiet. It was peaceful. And it was comfortable. Professor Talvik sat there for nearly 2 minutes without speaking. Then, slowly, he climbed back out. He stood facing Do-hyun. The human did not look away. He did not look nervous or triumphant. He simply waited. "Explain to me," Professor Talvik said, "how you knew to do this." Do-hyun took a breath. "On Earth, humans have lived in every environment you can imagine. Deserts, frozen wastelands, jungles, mountains. We do not have 4 arms like your species. We do not have crystalline bodies like the Orellans. We do not have the strength of the Valdori. We are weak. We are soft. Our senses are limited." He paused. "But we survive. We always survive. Because we learned, very early in our history, that the environment is not our enemy. It is our tool. The desert wants to kill us with heat. We dig into the ground, where it is cool. The cold wants to freeze us. We trap air to hold our warmth. The wind wants to tear our shelters apart. We build low to the ground and let it pass over us." Professor Talvik listened without interrupting. "When I was 6 years old," Do-hyun continued, "my grandfather took me into the mountains. He was a farmer. But before that, his father had been a soldier who survived a war by living in the wilderness for months. The knowledge passed down through generations. My grandfather said the earth itself wants to protect us if we know how to ask." "If you know how to ask," Talvik repeated slowly. "What does that mean?" Do-hyun gestured at the shelter. "It means paying attention. It means observing before acting. When I arrived in this zone, I did not immediately start building. I watched. I looked at the terrain. I checked the wind direction. I found the natural features that could help me. The rocky outcrop. The depression in the ground. These things were already here. I did not create them. I just recognized their value. From the crowd of observers, Brixa stepped forward. Her crystalline body was glowing softly, a sign, Do-hyun had learned, of intense thought. I calculated 200 structural possibilities, she said. I optimized for strength, stability, and material efficiency. My design was mathematically perfect. And yet, she paused. It never occurred to me to use what was already there. Do-hyun nodded. That is because you were thinking like an engineer. You wanted to build something from nothing. But survival is not about building. It is about adapting. Korin rumbled forward as well. The massive Valdori looked down at the simple pit shelter with something like embarrassment. I built a fortress, he said. I used my strength to stack stones that no other species could lift. I thought this made me superior. He shook his heavy head. But my fortress was hot in the day and cold at night. I suffered inside my own creation. Strength is useful, Do-hyun said gently. But strength alone is not enough. On Earth, there were creatures far stronger than humans. Lions, bears, elephants. They are gone now, or they live only in protected areas. Humans are everywhere. Why? Korin asked. Because we learned to think, to plan, to use everything around us, including our weaknesses, as tools. Professor Talvik had been silent through this exchange. Now he spoke again. You said humans have no special abilities. But I think you are wrong. Do-hyun looked at him curiously. What do you mean? The ability to observe, to adapt, to learn from ancestors who lived thousands of years ago. Talvik's voice was different now, less condescending, more thoughtful. These are not weaknesses. They are perhaps the most dangerous abilities in the galaxy. He turned to face the gathered crowd. I have taught survival engineering for 40 years. I have seen students from every major species in the galactic community. And in all that time, I have never seen anyone complete this exam in under 30 minutes. He looked back at Do-hyun. Until today, a human, a member of a species that has been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries, completed it in less than 10 minutes, using techniques his ancestors developed before they had fire. Subin felt tears streaming down her face. She did not try to stop them. I was wrong, Professor Talvik said. The words seemed to cost him something. Mirelians did not apologize easily. I underestimated your species. I assumed that your lack of biological advantages meant you had nothing to offer. But biology is not destiny. What you have is something else. Something I do not fully understand. What is that? Someone in the crowd asked. Professor Talvik considered the question for a long moment. Humans call it ingenuity, I believe. The ability to see possibilities where others see only obstacles. The refusal to accept that a problem cannot be solved. He extended one of his 4 hands toward Do-hyun. It was a gesture of respect, a formal acknowledgement between equals. Do-hyun took the hand and shook it firmly. Thank you, Professor, he said. But I did not do anything special. I just did what any human would have done. Talvik made a sound that might have been a laugh. That, young man, is exactly the point. The crowd began to disperse. Students and officials talked among themselves in low voices, processing what they had witnessed. Some seemed skeptical. Others were clearly impressed. A few looked thoughtful, as if seeing humans in a new light for the first time. Subin pushed through the crowd until she reached Do-hyun. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him in a hug. He stiffened for a moment, surprised, then relaxed and hugged her back. You did it, she whispered. You actually did it. We did it, he corrected. You believed in me when no one else did. She pulled back and looked at him. I always knew you could do it. I didn't know you could do it this well. Do-hyun laughed. It was a real laugh, warm, and genuine. It felt good. As they walked back toward the teleportation platform, Brixa fell into step beside them. Her crystalline body cast small rainbows in the neutral light. "I would like to learn more," she said. "About human survival techniques. About this ingenuity," the professor mentioned. "Would you be willing to teach me?" Do-hyun considered this. "I am just a student, like you. You have knowledge I do not possess," Brixa replied. "That makes you a teacher." Do-hyun glanced at Subin, who smiled and nodded encouragingly. "All right," he said. "I will teach you what I know. But you have to teach me something in return. Your mathematical calculations are incredible. I want to understand how you think." Brixa's body flickered with bright colors, the Aurelian equivalent of a smile. Corin had been walking behind them, listening. Now he spoke up. "I would also like to learn. My strength has always been enough. But today I saw that strength alone will not always save me." Do-hyun nodded. "Then, you are already learning the most important lesson." As they stepped onto the teleportation platform together, Do-hyun looked up at the gray simulation sky one last time. Somewhere beyond it, the real stars were waiting stars that humans had only recently begun to explore. His grandfather had never seen those stars. He had lived and died on Earth, in a small village in the mountains. But everything he had taught Do-hyun had traveled with him across the vastness of space, proving useful on a moon orbiting a gas giant in a distant solar system. Knowledge does not care about distance, Do-hyun thought. It only cares about being passed on. The teleportation light surrounded them, and they were gone. 1 week had passed since the exam, but the academy had not stopped talking about it. In the cafeteria, students gathered in groups, debating what they had witnessed. In the dormitories, videos of Do-hyun's shelter construction circulated through personal devices. In the faculty offices, professors discussed the implications. What did it mean that a human had shattered a record held by Morellians for a decade? Do-hyun tried to ignore all of it. He was not comfortable with attention. He had never wanted to be famous or admired. He just wanted to learn, to improve, to honor the teachings his grandfather had given him. But the attention found him anyway. Students who had never spoken to him before now approached him in the hallways. Some wanted to congratulate him. Others wanted to ask questions. A few still seemed skeptical, convinced that he must have cheated somehow, though the academy's investigation had found nothing improper. Subin walked beside him wherever possible, acting as a buffer between Do-hyun and the curious crowds. "You are going to have to get used to this," she told him one morning, as they walked toward the lecture hall. "You are a celebrity now." "I do not want to be a celebrity," Do-hyun said. "I just want to go to class." Subin laughed. "Well, you should have thought about that before you humiliated half the galaxy's best survival engineers." Do-hyun winced. "I did not mean to humiliate anyone. I know. That almost makes it worse for them." She patted his shoulder. "Relax. They will get over it. Eventually." When they entered the lecture hall, Do-hyun was surprised to find it more crowded than usual. Students from other departments had come to observe. They sat in the back rows and along the walls, watching with curious eyes. Professor Talvik stood at the front of the room. He waited until everyone was seated, then raised one of his 4 hands for silence. "Before we begin today's lesson," he said, "I wish to address what happened last week." The room went very quiet. Professor Talvik turned to the large screen behind him and pressed a button. Footage began to play. Do-hyun arriving in the simulation zone, standing still for 2 minutes, then moving with quick efficiency to construct his shelter. "For 40 years, I have taught at this academy," the professor said. "In that time, I have developed certain beliefs about which species are suited for which tasks. These beliefs were based on observation and experience. I thought they were facts. He paused the footage at the moment when Do-hyun began digging. "I was wrong." Murmurs rippled through the room. Professor Talvik had never admitted to being wrong about anything. Humans have been part of the galactic community for less than 200 years. In that time, They have been treated as newcomers, tolerated, sometimes patronized, often dismissed. I myself have been guilty of this dismissal. He turned to face the students directly. But last week, I watched a human accomplish something that should have been impossible. Not because he had special abilities, not because he had advanced technology, but because he possessed something far more valuable: the accumulated wisdom of his ancestors. The footage resumed, showing Do-hyun layering vegetation over the metal framework. What you are seeing is not a new technique, Professor Talvik continued. It is ancient. Humans developed these methods 10,000 years ago, perhaps longer. They have been building shelters like this since before they discovered metal, before they developed writing, before they even understood why these techniques worked. He stopped the footage again. When I asked the human student how he knew to do this, he told me his grandfather taught him. His grandfather, who was a farmer, who learned from his father, who was a soldier. Knowledge passed down through generations, surviving wars and famines and disasters, until it reached a young man standing on a moon in another star system. Professor Talvik let that sink in. This is what makes humans dangerous, he said. Not their strength, they have little. Not their technology, it is inferior to ours. What makes them dangerous is their refusal to forget. They carry their entire history with them, in stories and traditions and lessons taught from parent to child. And when they need that knowledge, they use it. He looked directly at Do-hyun, who sat in his usual seat at the back of the room. Kang Do-hyun, the professor said, I would like to offer you a position as teaching assistant for this course. Gasps filled the room. Teaching assistant positions were highly competitive. They were usually given to graduating students, not second years, and they had never, in the history of the academy, been given to a human. Do-hyun blinked. You have demonstrated knowledge that is not contained in any of our textbooks, Professor Talvik said. Knowledge that could benefit every student in this academy. I would be honored if you would share it. For a long moment, Do-hyun did not know what to say. He looked at Subin, who was grinning so widely it looked like her face might split in half. I accept, Do-hyun said finally. Thank you, Professor. Applause broke out across the room. Some of it was polite, some of it was genuine, and some of it came from Brixa and Korin, who clapped with enthusiasm, Brixa's crystalline hands chiming like bells, Korin's stone palms rumbling like thunder. After class, students crowded around Do-hyun to offer congratulations. He accepted their words with quiet gratitude, trying not to let the attention overwhelm him. Brixa approached him when the crowd had thinned. I have been thinking about what you said, she told him. About using what is already there, instead of building something new. Brixa, and I realize that my species does this too, in our own way. Our bodies are crystalline. We grow them from the minerals in our environment. We do not build, we integrate. She paused. I had forgotten this. I was so focused on learning galactic engineering techniques that I forgot what my own ancestors knew. Do-hyun nodded slowly. Every species has wisdom like this. The problem is that we forget. We think that new knowledge must be better than old knowledge. But sometimes, the old ways are old because they work. Brixa's body flickered with thoughtful colors. You are very wise for someone so young. I am not wise, Do-hyun said. I just listened to my grandfather. Later that day, Do-hyun and Subin walked through the academy gardens. The plants here came from dozens of different worlds, flowers that glowed in the dark, trees with silver leaves, vines that moved like they were breathing. It was beautiful, but strange. So, Subin said, what are you going to teach first? Do-hyun had been thinking about this. Something simple, he said. Something fundamental. Like what? He smiled. How to make fire with sticks. Subin stopped walking. Seriously? Seriously. You would be surprised how many advanced species never figured it out. They developed plasma weapons and faster-than-light travel. But they never learned to create fire without technology. Subin laughed. I suppose that makes sense. If you have plasma technology, why would you need sticks? Because technology fails, Do-hyun said. Batteries die. Machines break. But knowledge stays with you forever. My grandfather always said that a person who can make fire will never truly be helpless. They continued walking. The alien sky above them was turning from pale blue to deep purple as Valaris 7's day cycle ended. Do-hyun, Subin said quietly. Do you think things will change now? For humans, I mean? He considered the question. Maybe. Or maybe not. One exam will not change how the galaxy sees us. But it is a start. A start toward what? Toward being seen as equals. Toward being respected, not just tolerated. He looked up at the stars that were beginning to appear. Humans have only been in space for a short time, but we have been surviving for 200,000 years. The galaxy is just now starting to realize what that means. Subin nodded. I like that. It makes me proud to be human. You should be proud, Do-hyun said. We are not the strongest, or the smartest, or the most powerful. But we are still here. After ice ages and plagues and wars and every disaster you can imagine, we are still here. And now we are reaching for the stars. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Subin asked, What do you think your grandfather would say if he could see you now? What did the Subin ask Zest? Do-hyun thought about the old man, his weathered hands, his patient voice, the way he smiled when Do-hyun successfully built his first shelter in the mountains. I think he would say that he always knew I would do something like this, Do-hyun said. And then he would tell me not to let it go to my head. He would say that pride is dangerous, and that the best thing I can do is teach others what I know. That sounds like good advice. It is. He always gave good advice. Do-hyun paused. I just wish he could have seen this. Seen where his teachings would lead. Subin took his hand gently. Maybe he can. Who knows what happens after we die? Maybe he is watching right now, from somewhere beyond the stars. Do-hyun smiled at the thought. It was a nice idea. Even if he was not sure he believed it. Come on, he said. It is getting cold. Let us go back inside. As they walked toward the dormitory building, Subin glanced at him sideways. So, Professor's assistant Kang Do-hyun, when does your first lesson begin? Tomorrow, he said. Professor Talvik wants me to demonstrate basic shelter construction to the first-year class. Nervous? He shook his head. No. I have been doing this since I was 6 years old. It is just bigger now. A bigger classroom. More students. Higher stakes. But the same knowledge. Yes. The same knowledge. The same techniques. The same wisdom that kept my ancestors alive for thousands of generations. He smiled. It does not matter if I am teaching one child in the mountains or 100 aliens on a moon. The lessons are the same. They reached the dormitory entrance. Before going inside, Do-hyun looked back at the garden, at the strange alien plants and the unfamiliar stars. This was not home. It might never feel like home, but he had found something here. A purpose, a place, a chance to share what his people had learned through millennia of struggle and survival. His grandfather had given him a gift. Now it was his turn to pass it on. Tomorrow, he would teach the galaxy how to make fire with sticks. And after that, who knew what else? The stars were waiting. And humanity was just getting started.